Our joint neighbor, we are also closely following the process of establishing the new government following the elections for the parliament. With my distinguished counterpart, we also talked about the security and stability of Iraq, and we underlined the importance of this for our countries and for the region. And we have a will and determination to work closely with the new Iraqi government. Distinguished members of the press, Turkey and Iran are two important actors of the current geography that we are existing in. And in this framework, the continuation of the contacts is not just important for our bilateral relations, but for also the regional security and welfare. I would like to thank my distinguished friend, Foreign Minister Arakci, for this visit and for his contributions. And following this visit, our president is also going to receive Foreign Minister Arakci. And once again, I would like to say welcome to our country and to Istanbul. The floor is yours, Mr. Minister. In the name of God, the merciful and the beneficiary. I would like to greet all of the members of the press, and first and foremost, I would like to thank distinguished brother, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, for inviting me and for his hospitality and the warm interest that he has extended to me and to the accompanying delegation. We had very productive negotiations. We talked about various different topics, about various challenges, had exchanges of opinions, both in relation to bilateral relations, regional issues, and international issues. Iran and Turkey are both neighbors and friends. And in dire days and in good days, we have always sided with each other. The relations between the two countries throughout history have always been brotherly and in a friendly manner, especially in the recent times when the Zionist regime attacked the rights of the Iranian people, and also during the recent terrorist attacks that we experienced in January. Apart from outside our country, this was actually governed and managed by the Israeli forces. The Turkish authorities have always sided with us, and they have always supported us, expressing their very valuable opinion indeed. And likewise, in this manner, on behalf of the Iranian government, I would like to thank the whole country, the government of Turkey, to the president and to Minister Hakan Fidan. And I would also like to thank my counterpart for expressing his wishes for condolences on the lives lost during these events in Iran. We agree as both countries, both the events that are taking place in our region that are actually because of the illegitimate interventions of some outside forces. Israel regime is actually implementing some conspiracy theories and is trying to weaken the countries of the region so that there is a warfare so that they can reach their own wishes and targets. We agree with my counterpart. The Zionist regime has the intention of creating a war which is never ending, and they want to manage and govern the whole region. This is a very important threat, and this is something which all the countries of the region see clearly. In order to fight against this common threat, unfortunately, they are receiving the unlimited support of the American government, and some Western countries are also supporting them. And vis-a-vis this attack, the countries of the region and Islamic countries should be more careful. When we had deliberations with my distinguished counterpart, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, we talked about all the tension in our region and the destructive effect of this in our region. We believe that all the countries of the region and the safety of all these countries is the safety of the whole region. The fact that one country enters a war is going to create such a threat for the countries of all of of our region, and it is going to disrupt the stability and security, and we're against all such interventions. And the plans of the Zionist regime should be what we are targeting of, and we will be welcome to participate in any countermeasures to these plans. To protect the national interest and also the regional security is our priority as Iran, and we never accept any dictation. And our previous experience has always shown that USA has never been loyal in the negotiations and has never shown any goodwill. But despite this, Iran is always ready to diplomatic processes that are based on common sense, on wisdom, on justice, taking into consideration our fundamental rights. The Islamic Republic of Iran once again is ready to sit down at the negotiation table pertaining to negotiation on nuclear arms. We never are in search of nuclear arms, and we never included this in our calculations for our own security and safety. And we have always defended that our nuclear initiatives have always been peaceful, and we are still at the same point, standing on the same position. Our nuclear activities have always been peaceful, and we never have been in search of nuclear arms. If these negotiations are based on mutual interest, mutual respect, and mutual trust, then we are ready to continue these negotiations. And if these negotiations are conducted in a just manner, with conscience, the Islamic Republic of Iran is always ready to participate in these negotiations and in this dialogue. To the government of Turkey, we do believe that their approach to find regional solutions to regional problems is the correct approach, and we are supporting this to protect the interest of our region. And we are always supporting any dialogue, any negotiation to establish peace amongst the countries of the region, so that the tension is reduced, so that stability is achieved, and we're always supporting all negotiations and would like to be a part of these negotiations. Regional ownership logic is the basis. With my distinguished friend and counterpart, Minister Hakan Fidan, we talked about Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and the other problems. My counterpart has already mentioned our initiatives on this. We are supporting territorial integrity in Syria, and we want to see the end of the occupation of the Zionist regime. And we believe that the government should be established and strengthened with the participation of all units in Syria, all citizens of Syria. We wanted the stability and unity of Syria, and we believe that the stability of Syria is going to provide stability for the region. Likewise, in Iraq, in the recent elections, the wishes of the Iraqi people should be also taken into consideration. For a just election, the Iraqi people have participated with a high participation rate, and we would like to congratulate the Iraqi people for achieving this. And we are against any kind of oppression that is going to violate their choice. In relation to Lebanon, we believe that amongst all the groups, there has to be a national dialogue established. And the Lebanese security strategy doctrine, this should be the decision of the Lebanese people. We are also supporting the outcome of this dialogue, and whatever the result of that dialogue, we are siding with this. Also in Palestine and Gaza, we want the genocide to end as soon as possible, and humanitarian assistance to be provided to the people of Gaza. We would like to thank the Turkish government for their initiative in the establishment of peace in Gaza. They have really worked hard to achieve this. And also especially President Erdogan and Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. We are grateful for their efforts because they have always exhibited a very constructive approach on this aspect. And we support any type of participation of Turkey, which is important for peace and stability of our region. And we are supporting their...
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We just heard Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan address a joint press conference in Turkey. Let's now discuss it further. Joining us now is Mr. Mohammed Osman. He's a Middle East expert, joins us live from Cairo. Thank you very much, Mr. Osman, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what does this timing suggest of Iranian, foreign minister's visit to Turkey, and how can they lead these talks to further diplomatic talks with U.S.?
Thank you for having me, Asuma. What a pleasure to be with you as usual. It seems that that Turkey is playing a very prominent role as of late in attempts to mediate between the United States and Iran in order to push the situation towards some sort of de-escalation. And of course, Turkey, in addition to countries like Saudi Arabia, like Oman, Egypt, and Qatar, and beyond the Arab region and the Middle East, of course, Russia also plays a role. All of these powers and all of these actors are attempting to de-escalate the situation and are attempting to find some grounds for negotiations and dialogue between the United States and Iran. It seems, according to reports, that Turkey had even much more ambitious ideas in this regard. Turkey was urging the Iranians to be more flexible, and also they advised the Iranians reportedly to offer the Americans, promised the Americans more flexibility on the nuclear issue, and also offered President Trump and the Trump administration lucrative opportunities in Iran's very promising oil sector, which is basically suffering under Western sanctions at this point. However, of course, these measures and these efforts by regional and international actors, I believe, are close to futile at this point, because unfortunately, the United States and Iran, due to the rigidity of both powers or both parties, are beyond finding a common ground for negotiations given the current circumstances. The United States is placing forward a formula for basically the surrender of Iran, not really a sound ground for negotiations. They are asking for the suspension of enrichment, the turning over of the enriched uranium, the dismantlement of the missile program, and of course that Iran severs its relationship with its regional proxies. This is a formula for surrender. This is not a formula for negotiations. Negotiations means that an outcome will allow the Iranians to make concessions and make compromises while saving face at the same time. But basically, the Americans tend to humiliate Iran without giving them any guarantees in return that will ensure the regime's survivability of sorts. And on the other hand, the Iranians are being completely unrealistic about what to expect from these negotiations. They act as if they are the peers and the equals of the Americans. And of course, this is not the case at all. The United States is a massive superpower. Iran is merely a regional power that is suffering under an embargo and American sanctions, and even periodic attacks and military actions against its interests in the region. So as you can see, Asuma, they do believe that they can negotiate with the Americans on the premise of the 2015 deal. This will never happen. The Americans will never accept it. They will accept nothing short of neutralizing the nuclear threat of Iran, the idea that Iran can possess a nuclear weapon. And this requires Iran to present very serious concessions in the nuclear field. However, the United States, on the other hand, also has to be willing not to humiliate Iran, and not to negotiate on things that fall within the realm of Iranian sovereignty, like its conventional missile program, for example. This is, in my opinion, off limits. Why would you try to limit their ability to develop legitimate conventional weapons, basically? So this is the problem, Asuma. So as long as this is the situation, we will be heading and edging more and more towards escalation and war, unfortunately, Asuma.
Right. So building on your answer, you mentioned that Iranians and US is of course not equal. I agree with you there, but Iranians are talking as if they are seeing eye to eye with US. So what will be the benefit for US to engage in talks with Iran right now?
I think that the United States should be the more responsible actor, Asuma, because in all cases,
yes,
any foreign aggression or act of aggression is unjustifiable under international law. What the United States is doing at the moment, this mobilization of military assets, the threat of the use of force, and maybe even the eventuality of the use of force, God forbid, in the coming days and weeks, this is a huge transgression of international law. And this basically supports the idea that we are not in a rules-based order anymore, that we are living in a state of anarchy where might makes right. And if that's the case, then of course this will open the door to more chaos in the region and in the world and in the region. And we are seeing that transpire, unfortunately. What the Americans have done with Venezuela, what's going on in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, how China is acting. So basically all of the superpowers now will act in a very irresponsible way, since the United States is not exactly leading by example at the moment, Asuma. So the United States does have legitimate concerns with regards to Iran's nuclear program. These can be remedied through a political resolution, meaning that they might demand these massive concessions from Iran. However, they have to be in return for viable, meaningful guarantees, like lifting sanctions, like security guarantees that Iran will not be attacked again by Israel or the United States. These are all prerequisites for a workable deal at any given time. And that's the problem on the part of the United States. The United States is being maximalist about this. They believe that they can force Iran to surrender. And of course, you can see Israel written all over this policy, unfortunately, Asuma. Even though the United States is not really interested in regime change per se, it's not a priority for the United States. If anything, it could be a massive headache for the United States if the regime falls in Iran without a viable alternative. It will turn into chaos. So this is a major state, a pivot state in the Middle East and Central Asia. A collapse of the regime in there, in a country that is 1.6 million square kilometers big and houses or has about a population of over 92 million people. This will create a disaster for the region. And on the other hand, the Iranians have to be realistic, because as long as they are as delusional as they are now, they will get annihilated.
And one of the cards you mentioned in my first question is that oil sector, that Iran is willing to give more access to oil of theirs. Do you think Trump will buy into this? Do you think Trump administration does need more oil, as we know that it has in much more access than compared to last year, as we know what happened with Venezuela?
Yeah, this is a Turkish idea. Asuma. Iran never said that it's ready to do any of that. Okay. The Turks were thinking outside the box, thinking that this might attract Trump. But I don't think that's really possible. I think that the Turks are really pushing their luck with such unserious propositions, in my opinion. I believe that this is not a serious starting point. The issue is not economic, as you just said. The United States already has control over major portions of the world's oil, including its own. The U.S. is a major producer of oil. Venezuelan oil now basically is under de facto U.S. control, as we have seen the unfortunate events that happened in Venezuela, and we discussed it together on your program more than once, Asuma. So they do not really need Iranian oil at this point, and Middle Eastern oil for the United States. Really, the United States is not really that reliant on Middle Eastern oil in general. But however, they will be interested in controlling the oil markets in the world in general, so that they can control prices, so that they can have more leverage over Russia, for example, whose economy is very dependent on oil, and also at the same time they can have a card by which they can blackmail China with. China is a net importer of oil. Most of its oil comes from the Middle East, including 15% from Iran, for example. So I think one of the main reasons behind the idea of subduing Iran and bringing Iran under control basically is part of the competition, part of it, one of its aspects, not the main aspect, but one of its aspects and dimensions is the China-US geopolitical competition for control and influence in the world at this point. And of course, this is a fight over resources. However, the Iranian issue does not really feature as a main factor in that. It's more of a geopolitical issue concerning the security of Israel and the insurance of Israeli and US, and of course, by consequence, US dominance and hegemony in the region. And unfortunately, Iran is failing to understand that at this point, and this could lead to military conflict if they do not deal with this in a more flexible way that can lead to a political settlement, Asuma.
Right. And now adding Turkish Foreign Minister to our conversation, he has called for US-Iran talks on nuclear program to restart. So what is the possibility of this and how might that look like?
They have to change their positions, both of them, and starting with the Americans. The Americans cannot walk into these negotiations putting very unrealistic preconditions, like basically the dismantlement of the Iranian nuclear program, and also in addition to that, giving dimensions that are way beyond the nuclear issue, like the conventional ballistic missiles program, like the relations of Iran with its regional proxies. These are separate issues that need to be discussed separately. And I think that Iran might be more flexible with regards to the nuclear program and the idea of reducing the rate of enrichment, even in turning over the enriched uranium, in subjecting their own nuclear program to much more stringent oversight and scrutiny by international organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency. However, I do not think that the Iranians can really go beyond that. The idea of completely dismantling the enrichment facilities is unrealistic, especially that most of them, or the major ones, were destroyed in the last war. So the idea that Iran still has the capability of enriching massive amounts of uranium that will allow it to develop a nuclear weapon do not really correspond to reality. And the Israelis and the Americans know that, and they admit that. However, they choose to pretend otherwise. They choose to pretend as if the Iranians are an imminent nuclear threat, and this is not true. Iran did not recover yet from the 12-day war. If anything, Iran is even struggling with its own domestic crisis right now. We have seen the wave of protests as of late that Iran has put down very violently and brutally. And with the ongoing economic conditions, they are in no shape to engage in any more adventurism. They will be much more focused on stabilizing the country and containing the collapsing economy. Their economy is in free fall. So the idea that Iran is an imminent threat, as the US and Israel are trying to say, is really far from the truth, Asuma. However, I do believe that what is being presented by the United States is not a serious proposition of negotiation or political settlement. It's an ultimatum. Either surrender to our demands, and we will call it a diplomatic negotiation, or we will go to war. This is a very dangerous formula, very counterproductive, and it might backfire in the face of the Americans and the Israelis, Asuma, because Iran will fight back.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Mohammad Osman for joining us and sharing that insight on this. Now, moving the focus to China, China is pushing back against comments from US President Donald Trump, who warned it was very dangerous for close ally Britain to deal with Beijing. Spokesperson Goh Jiakun has said China is willing to strengthen cooperation with all countries, including Britain. He has stressed that Beijing supports engagement based on mutual benefit and what he called win-win results. The remarks underline growing diplomatic friction as Washington urges allies to limit ties with China while Beijing defends its global partnership. Now for this, we welcome Mr. Professor Georgi Toleraya. He's a professor at Russia Academy of Science. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now, Professor, looking at this, how is this tactic working for U.S.? As you know, it seems like it pushes away the allies and then wants it to choose them still over other countries in terms, particularly with U.S. and UK and China now.
Well, I think it's rather ironic that on the one hand, President Trump himself is trying to make some deal with China and well, planning to visit it, and they have some kind of plans for some kind of cooperation. At the same time, he prohibits his allies to develop cooperation. Of course, Britain and European countries, they may be too late to turn to the east, but nevertheless, they're trying to do it. And I find it ironic that US is prohibiting them to do so. China, of course, doesn't like it, but I think that the European countries, including Britain, will have to follow the lead of the US in this case.
So why can't UK stand for itself? Why does this double standard always work for US?
Well, those whose power is right. That's the rule of the game today. And in fact, I'm reading now, I came across an old book, Godfather by Mario Puzo, for which a famous film was made. And when I read about how the Sicilian mafia in the US operates between itself, it gives a pretty good clue for the current situation, current international politics. Those who have the power is always right.
And how long will this rhetoric work for US?
Well, the practice have been there for many decades, but it was masked, it was decorated with some kind of liberal words and some kind of narrative, democratic narrative. Now it came into the open, and it was clear for everybody even before that. Now it's easier just not to have any illusions and to act in accordance with this real rules of the game, real laws of nature, which are now in force.
And what cards can China and UK play to counter this pressure by US, if any?
Well, China has its own trump cards. Sorry for this, using the word Trump in its direct meaning. So China has its own ability to withstand this pressure, and I think they will use it. It may be not that open, not be said directly, but China will also use its abilities, its capacity to pursue its own interests.
Thank you very much, Professor, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, staying in China, Beijing has vowed to take necessary measures to protect the interests of its companies following Panama's Supreme Court decision to annul contracts allowing Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison to operate key ports at the Panama Canal. Let's listen in.
相信你注意到，有关企业已经第一时间发表声明，表示该裁决有悖于巴拿马方面批准相关特许经营权的法律，企业将保留包括诉讼法律程序在内的所有权利。中方将采取一切必要措施，坚决维护中方企业正当合法权益。
This ruling, which targets the laws supporting operations at the Balbao and Cristobal ports, comes a year after U.S. President Donald Trump's claims that China was controlling the vital waterway. CK Hutchison, through Panama Ports Company, has managed the port since the 1990s and was negotiating a $22.8 billion deal to sell its global port operations to a consortium led by U.S. investment firm BlackRock and China's Costco. While Panama has repeatedly rejected claims of Chinese control over the canal, the decision may disrupt the ongoing deal. Chinese officials have expressed their discontent, and Hong Kong has rejected the court's ruling, arguing it could harm Panamanian families dependent on the port. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Georgi Toleraya. He's a professor at Russia Academy of Science, joins us live. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us and staying with us. Now, what more can you tell us about this particular port in Panama?
Well, the Hutchinson company has been chosen through what they said is a transparent and legal process, and they operated, and so it's obviously not the independent decision by the Panama government. It may look independent, and Panama says it operates Panama channel by itself and will do so. But anyway, we can see that there's U.S. pressure in order to limit the Chinese influence, even if it's a Hong Kong company, still it's they see China behind it, to limit the Chinese influence and control of the strategic water artery.
Right. And this says that, the reports show that it's been controlled since the 1990s. So why is suddenly U.S. alarmed by so many places where China has hold a foothold now for a long time?
The U.S. is trying hard to dismantle and to disrupt Chinese influence, Chinese control wherever it was, regardless of the legality of this control, regardless of how long it has been exercised. So they'll try to hurt China and to disrupt Chinese control any way possible, in every way where it's possible. We shouldn't doubt it.
And also, they are trying to sell, negotiating this deal to sell to consortium led by U.S. investment firm BlackRock and China's Costco. So at the end of the day, China is still involved. Why so?
BlackRock and other 3 or 4, 5 investment companies, they control all the big businesses. So whenever there is any globally, so whenever you see something which is of importance to the global economy, you sure will have this or other similar investment companies behind them. So there's nothing so much surprising.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to thank Professor Georgie Toleraer for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to the Netherlands Consumer Protection Regulator, ACM, has launched an investigation into U.S. gaming platform Roblox over potential risks to underage users in the European Union. According to reports, the regulator will assess whether Roblox is taking adequate measures to protect minors, referring to the EU's Digital Services Act, which requires platforms to take appropriate and proportionate measures to ensure safety for minors using their services. Roblox has stated that the company is strongly committed to complying with the EU Digital Services Act and referred to the gaming platform's announcement in November of last year that it would require age verification via facial recognition to limit communication between children and adults. Roblox added that Roblox looks forward to providing the ACM with further clarity on the many policies and safeguards we have in place to protect the minors. Now we have a breaking news. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced his pick to lead the Federal Reserve. He is nominating Mr. Kevin Warsh, a former Fed official, to serve as the chairman of the Board of Governors. Trump has said he believes Warsh can guide the Fed effectively. The nomination now goes to the Senate for confirmation. This marks a significant step in Trump's influence over U.S. economic policy. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.